Alright, it was the night after Halloween special anyway. This is the 30th, and we played Cleanup in Aisle 9 last night on the 29th, and this is the aftermath. The game lasted 3.5 hours, which is a little shy of where I really wanted it to be. Usually goes for 4 to 5 hours. But I think this one was slightly different to the other two I've designed for the last 2 years. This one was far more player sort of orientated, and with that sort of game you have to let the players do what they want and really drive the plot in some ways. That can be hit and miss depending on how good your players are. One thing players will never like you to say is that they generally don't come up with great ideas unless you give them enough fuel for the fire. What I mean by that is, like, you've got to give them a tight enough option that they will bite into it hard and come up with interesting ways. It was always it's a design philosophy actually. It's like it's always taught as you want the creative freedom of a tight brief, and that's the same with the players. You want to give them that sort of just a big enough box and then tell them how to get out of it. With this playthrough, I think we did pretty well when it came to the humour and the style that I was going for Twin Lakes Chronicle. The characters were definitely interesting and people enjoyed the NPCs that walked in. We had Patricia bore people to death. We had Josh jumping across the aisles with sort of a mallet, trying to make everything into a game. We had Reese taking everything slow and steady until he stole Brian's electric scooter to try and skewer the meat demon at the end. Brian was trying to save the cat lady and dealing with the ruffians outside in the parking lot. We had Sophia take over the sort of produce aisle that was offered to her by the Maggie dolls as part of a sort of breakaway nation. We had Debbie and the Doomsayer after someone died and picked her up, sort of manipulating the crowd and bringing the sort of crowd into the party. And generally it was a manic and a pretty good time. I will say that I didn't introduce some elements which I think I should have done, like the helicopter coming to the roof and tightening the surrounding. I think it was a bit of a problem actually, letting the crowd be interacted with in a meaningful way. Debbie used her ability, what's it called? Debbie. Bullshit artist to actually make them sort of listen to her and just let them in, and that sort of changed the dynamics of the game somewhat. It was all in good fun and everyone had a great time as Brian set the sort of floor on fire to try and get rid of the sort of veins of evil, which are now probably going to be a staple of the actual supermarket. I think the sort of lore behind this place is like these things will always grow and they'll always have to be like beaten back, and there'll always be these little menaces or sort of incidents that'll have to be dealt with in this supermarket throughout the sort of course of the history of the building. So it becomes like an everyday thing that the sort of veins of evil will start to sort of rise up and you have to get the pest control back in to sort of beat them down. I think that's quite a good sort of like little sort of bit of lore for them. We opened the scenario with some crazy characters coming in. We used Mr. Summers and Otis, his gator, as a sort of opening hook to set the tone, and we went from there. All in all, I think everyone had a good time. Reese spent most of the time like mincing possums and then trying to sort of deal with the sort of meat demon, and he did a grand job until he met his fate. And it was Otis that sort of finished it off. But yeah, this sort of without the crowd, these two sort of ran away, and it was just open enough to let everyone out. It's one of the biggest problems when it comes to these sort of things. So a lot of information to chew on, a lot of information to sort of reflect on, and we'll sort of see how it goes from there. But all in all, I think we had a good time and everything went great. the humour landed, the style happened well. I will say the map is a little shabby, and we've got some ideas of making this a little bit nicer and tarting it up a little bit more. And yeah, it all went well. I think we'll definitely structure it better and make it more of a zombie horror, having the rioters pushing into the building and pushing them further into a smaller and smaller space to make sort of their decisions, and then escaping some way onto the roof. Probably have some sort of roof access somewhere around in the warehouse. It will force the encounter with the meat horror a little bit more, and make the sort of staff a little bit more interactive with saving the customers rather than treating them like how they were treated. The players have some odd notions when it comes to staff policies, I suppose, for the supermarket. But yeah, everyone had fun. And I think today we'll just chill out and have a think, write down a few notes, and then we'll be back to restructure the scenario so it's a little bit more smooth. So it is day 9. Today we're going to have a good scour over the sort of basics of the scenario. Now we had a sort of time to sort of sit down and think about how the players interacted with it, and what failed, what fell down, and what people liked, and how to use the structure and beats and pacing to really reinforce the story and lead a little bit better than we did before. So first of all, the premise is changing slightly, so there's a bit more sort of dubious corruption, the sort of happy mark being built sort of quickly and cheaply on the foundations of this knockdown orphanage, which shouldn't have been sold in the first place because it was a grade 3 listed building of local importance. And after a few months it was opened, and all the sort of hoo-ha kicks off with all the protesters gathering to protest the destruction of the sort of local landmark. This pretty much stayed most of the same. It's just tarted up a bit, made it a bit nicer, sort of made it a little bit sort of more structured. What's really happening? We're going to talk about the sort of little Maggie dolls revolting. During the game, one of the things I had countless Christmas songs playing in the background, just to piss off the players, basically, just for my own amusement. And I sort of hit on the idea during that the Maggie dolls were rebelling because of the sort of repetitive, sort of like almost audio torture of this sort of like one store track going over and over and over. It was a gripe my lassie had when she worked in TK Maxx all the time. She used to absolutely hate Christmas because of the sort of one track that was played for 8 hours solid during all her shifts. So I made that sort of the Maggie dolls sort of like gripe, and why they think the humans are torturing them with unusual and cruel punishment, and why they want to set up the nation of Maggie so they can rule themselves and stop such nonsense. And one of the players, I think it was Thrush, said that was the most ridiculous thing they've ever heard. So that is now staying. Yeah, so from there we sort of like going back, sort of buying in. One of the things you have to do in horror, most stories really, is sort of re-establishing or sort of like reminding people of the beats or the story again and again. So you've got to go for this lingering sort of like sort of malevolence in the floor from the Mrs. Montgomery's heart, which is in the foundations, and all the veins of evil as sort of like lingering, and like almost like a weed now, sort of uncontrollable in the area. So you've got to kind of reinforce this a little bit. So we're going to probably put this in some of the lore for the NPCs at some point. So when they interact with the NPCs, they can actually get a little bit of tasters of the background here and there. I didn't actually do that for the playthrough because I knew the lore from the old one, so I could just give it here and there. But obviously the newer GMs couldn't because they don't know it. So you've got to feed that information to them. From there, the setup is pretty simple. Basically, you're standing at the start of the sort of scenario, the front door. Mandy is giving you a lecture on where she sees this actually going, and Yeah, it goes from there. She sort of lays down the law, gives the sort of intro, and then opens the door. That's pretty much quite standard, and it should work fairly well. She goes into how they're sort of magically going to find more dolls. They've got 5 stuck in the back, all that, etc. Nothing really has changed here. When it comes to the acts, however, we've incorporated quite a lot of what we were discussing yesterday, and some of the player feedback as well. We've got the Christmas songs on loop. We've got the players more directed by Mandy Lars rather than giving the sort of free reign to do what they like. They'll be stationed, or they'll be directed by Mandy to deal with certain customers. We're going to expand the customer base to, I think, about 12 to 15. We shall see. And we'll make sure Act 1 is all about customer service and getting them sort of orientated with the characters and the store. And that's pretty much the job of Act 1, to sort of buy into the world, introduce them to the characters, and get them immersed. Act 2, we've expanded this a lot. We're sort of including the sort of Nation of Maggie sort of thing from the sort of get-go. Again, we're going to reinforce the sort of the veins of evil and how what they're doing with the sort of the snake monsters, which is their first sort of iteration. The snake monsters are going to now go and find the Maggie dolls and sort of make them into the little horrors. And while the sort of the players are hunting them down and factory resetting them to stage 1 after they rebel on orders of Mandy. And with that, the crowd outside will start to become more ruckus, and they'll sort of like start chanting, and they'll gather more and more, and they'll start sort of throwing burning sort of trolleys into the building, and they'll cut the power at the very end, which will sort of signal the start of Act 3. With the mob being sort of almost like a sort of zombie-like horde or legion outside, the throng will push in and force them into a smaller and smaller space. Mandy will tell them to get their ass in gears, company policy and all that jazz, and help the customers. So all this sort of build-up interaction in Act 1 and 2 will pay off, as the players should have a sort of an emotional investment in these characters, whether that's good or bad. You've got to make the players feel something for an NPC, whether it's you've got to let them feel for a character, whether it's love, hate, or sort of creepy sort of vibe to them. The worst thing you can do is have players being indifferent whether the NPCs survive or not. They have to have some buy-in, and that's all down on to the GMs and how to sell them. We'll try and help them out as much as possible to make them cool, the NPCs, and make sure they sort of they do have that sort of a buy-in potential. But yeah, so all that's going to push everyone into the break room, where Maggie's father's going to be seen on TV, and he's going to send a chopper for his little girl to the roof, and then they're basically going to head to the roof. The meat monster's going to break out. They're going to be a big fight. Get to the roof. End the story, and that's pretty much that. The aftermath is we're basically going to have like a massive conspiracy sort of cover-up, something like the Umbrella sort of operation, sort of trying to keep local jobs, sort of hush, money being changed hands, and the Happy Mark being rebuilt as fast as possible. And we're going to have the sort of veins of evil be sort of like a reoccurring theme in the sort of Twin Lakes Chronicle sort of saga. They're just going to be like a sort of like a super weed which causes things to go evil, and I think that'll be the prevailing sort of thing which causes a lot of the problems in the town. We've got a local pest control company called Sino Weevil, which will basically be maybe a hook for a later sort of scenario. People can play perhaps as sort of members or employees of Sino Weevil, and that'll be perhaps them going around trying to kill off more of the sort of veins that crop up here and there, or even dealing with some more supernatural things. But for that, I think that's day 9, and I'll see you again in day 10. So it is day 10, and we are going to be looking at what we did today. We basically took what we had from the actual game, all the sort of input values, all the sort of characters, and reorganized them and sort of gave them a little bit of a nudge here and a polish there, and put them into the actual script to see what they looked like on paper. So we've got a little overview of what the shoppers are and why they're here. A lot of them are pulled towards the sort of opening of the Happy Mark because of the veins of evil in the foundation. So a lot of the NPCs which will come in have some sort of links to the old orphanage, and that's why they can give out lore that tells the PCs the story. So these are sort of like locals that all know fragments of information when put together build the bigger picture, and the jigsaw puzzle will start coming together quite rapidly. Yeah, we have Mr. Summers here. This is his stats. We have Otis, his gator underneath. His local knowledge is basically he'll basically talk about the sort of missing kids and all that sort of good stuff. You'll sort of like add in that, and I've also added in a shopping list, so they have an active route around the actual supermarket. That he's looking for 30 kilos of chicken for Otis. He's looking for candy snacks for himself, and he's looking for a sort of a Maggie doll for his grandson. Even though he's embarrassed about buying a doll for a boy, he's damn well going to do it. He's he's a good grandfather. And yeah, so we sort of mixed in a little bit more here, made him a little bit more of a fleshed out character, and give him a more of a sort of feeling. And Mr. Summers was said to be one of the sort of least interesting himself. Everyone liked Otis the Gator, but him himself needed a little bit of work. So we've got some sort of background in here as well. So he's an aliens chaser, and he thinks gators are prehistoric ancestors to aliens. We've got Mrs. Garrett, the cat lady. She was loved by all, and basically she's going to be the sort of rich daughter of a sort of local construction company owner. So her father basically was the construction company which built this supermarket. So he made all the workers sign an NDA, and basically she can say that they were complaining about veins in the wall, and he made them sign a non-disclosure agreement, but obviously Miss Garrett, his daughter, didn't, so she's telling people. She's also going to be picking up a few things around the sort of supermarket. So we've got kibble, we've got trout a la creme for people who might know where that reference comes from, and a box of wine for the single lady. We've got the Doomsayer, Linda McDonald. She's a sort of bored rich woman. Oh, see, we've got a problem there. That's the cat lady's entry. We need to change that. So we'll delete that for now and put just highlight that so we remember to do it. And yeah, so she's sort of going around, and she's looking for 12 bags of salt and vinegar crisps, a little Maggie doll for her niece, and some tin goods to see out the end of the world. And she can give you some tips. She was like a sort of, she's a bit of a lock-in and spends most of her time in front of the TV. So she saw the Ghost Adventure from the sort of October, and she sort of followed that and tells them about them being sent to the asylum and that sort of thing. And she's convinced the world is going to end because of what they said. Linking back in again to the first scenario. And then last but not least was the one we used was the child, the lost child, who was actually a full-grown adult. He's just a small person. And he's basically conning people to get Maggie dolls to flip them on eBay. So yeah, he can basically tell the players about the sort of kids he got lumped into after he got caught stealing. They thought he was a child, so they put him in with all these crazy kids, and they'll tell the sort of lore of October since from there as well. So we're pretty much doing admin, basically just tidying stuff up today, and yeah, seeing where we stand with the actual shoppers and the other NPCs. These got Mandalars here. We've got the possums. We've got the protesters now. We'll need a picture for them. And we've got what we've seen before, down here as well. We've also added the pre-gens in. These were basically the players' sort of characters, and sort of just, you know, tarting them up, making sure I'm happy with their little sort of blurb. And they're not like hugely sort of detailed. They mostly give off a lot of their character from that blurb. Their bad habits, their items, and a few of their stats. It's enough to give a flavour for the character for these things. You don't really need much at all. So with these all added, and what we did yesterday with the sort of key scenes, I think we're up to 4,162 out of 6,000 words. So we're pretty much over the 2/3 mark, and we've pretty much not done a huge amount of work here at all. So yeah, looking good, looking strong so far. So I think the next few days I'm going to spend changing the map, and then we'll probably go into the sort of changing up the supermarket's sort of layout after we've done the map, and we'll look at maybe doing some more shoppers as well at some point. So apart from that, I shall see you again day 11. So we're skipping a few days. It is day 14. We've been doing the map on and off for the last few days from day 11 to 14, and this thing is being a bit of a nightmare. There's just a lot to do to fill the shelves, and basically just fill out a piece here, a piece there. It's also something that takes a while for me. I always take a little bit too long probably to do maps, and I try to make them probably a bit too much detail in them as well. But I didn't want this to be the map that was put out for the sort of drive-through RPG sort of download, because it's a bit shabby and there's not a lot here. It's just a bit bland. So yeah, we've got like we had no service desks, we had no checkouts, we had no produce aisles, we've got no pharmacy. Just all the aisles are the same, just with sort of lettering, and yeah, just all in all, not the best map. It's fine, it's functional, it works. The back's a little bit better, and all the rest of it. So we thought we'd tart this up, make sure it all works just a little bit better. And from here we went on to yeah, just make sure it went a little bit better. So we went from that to this. Now, this isn't done by any length of the imagination. We still have all these shelving to do. We still got the produce aisle to do. We still got the checkouts to do. Still got the pharmacy to do. All that sort of good stuff. Deli and all that sort of thing as well. So we spent a few days just doing pretty much adding some Christmas themes into it. We spent a long time doing these sort of like frozen aisle sort of items in the actual freezers. We've got the turkeys, some meats, sausages, frozen mince, a few other things, like we've got some Cumberland sausages here. Different sort of things going along here, lollipops, ice creams, sort of peas, various boxed frozen foods for one person, frozen pizza and all that sort of good things. And we sort of like added a few things back here as well. We changed this around so it's a little bit more special. We have a sort of what we call them, yaks, I can't remember what they're called, pallet lifters. We've got some trolleys now. It makes it a bit more lived in as well. We've got some feet marks and put some frozen sort of permafrost on the floor in the sort of frozen section. Outside we've got made this look a little bit better. We've got some snow and stuff, and we've changed around the sort of the way that these bays work now. The traffic would properly come in, park and come out, rather than these bays being round the wrong way, which I didn't realise before. So now it's got a more logical sort of drive route. And we added the trolley bay as well. So Brian would come out here, deal with the trolleys, deal with the trash, deal with the sort of rioters as well. And so this part of the map would actually be getting a bit more used as well. And yeah, it's not too bad. It's looking a little bit better. It's looking a little bit more professional. Not quite so grim. And it's just taking a long time. So that's not a lot to update, other than grinding down this map. Until we do that, we'll probably skip a few days and just sort of do an overview. So yep, once this one's done, we'll go back and we'll go look at all the species and redo the sort of descriptions of all the species for the map after we do that, and yeah, we should be good to go. But this is probably going to take a few days, so this will be probably the last video on part 2, and we'll get back to you with part 3, which will be days hopefully 15 to 21. And yeah, like to know what you think in the comments below, and thanks for listening.